Welcome to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Norris. We're going to grow your leadership through neuroscience, psychology, and theology. Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 13 of the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. My name is Patrick Norris. We're living in unprecedented times. The COVID-19 novel virus has disrupted everything about the way we do life. We can feel the uncertainty around the world and certainly within leadership. We've got all this new terminology from social distancing to home isolation, immune compromised, infection quarantine. We're flattening the curve, and we're not just talking about our diets and how it affects our bodies. We've got epidemiologists and virologists, toilet paper phobiacs, etc. There are a ton of griefs and losses. There's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. You watch the news, many of us leaders, we spend a lot of time just digesting content because we lead and we are content leaders. Schools are closed, our favorite entertainments are no longer. We know that unemployment is on the exponential rise. Stock markets are crashing, and we know that retirement is uncertain for business owners and even churches. There are a lot of questions around what's going to happen. You have losses with people in our churches. They have lost jobs. In our businesses, graduations didn't happen. There's separation anxiety and loneliness. We know that there are a lot of implications about even going to the grocery store, getting out and about. People are dying, young and old, and yet we have a hope, we have a faith that is undying and unwavering because of what Jesus did in redemption. We don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know what's necessarily going to happen next. So our goal today is to help you lead with a whole heart, a healthy brain, and a soul on fire in uncertain times. Today's episode, I'm just so glad you're with us because we're going to begin preparing you for the next season of your leadership. Prepare after COVID-19 by listening to an interview with one of my very, very favorite leaders. We're teeing up an amazing episode at episode 13 with my friend and the general manager of the Kansas City Royals professional baseball club, Dayton Moore. Dayton is considered by many to be a leadership mastermind of the Kansas City Royals' 2 appearances in the World Series in both 2014 and 2015, winning the championship, the World Series, in 2015. Under his leadership, since 2011, no MLB club has earned more Gold Gloves. The Royals' 21 All-Star selections since 2013 is tied for the most in the American League, tied with the Yankees, which is crazy success for a small town market. Dayton has been named to the Kansas Baseball Hall of Fame. He was the Kansan of the Year in 2014, the Executive of the Year by Major League Baseball in 2014 and 2015. Dayton's known as an outspoken Christian, openly sharing the personal impact of his relationship with Christ. He's married and has 3 adult children, and I'll add that his kids grew up sitting next to him in church, even on Sundays during baseball season, which is a very worthy mention. Today, they all have experiential priority for Christ in his church in the cities that they all live in, and that's just pretty special. For me personally, Dayton is a favorite leadership example and a distant mentor. I've watched him in the lean seasons and the challenges that he faced early on. I've seen his humility in the celebration years. I've seen his players love him like a cherished director, counselor, friend, and even boss. One of the highlights of my own leadership is getting to spend time with him on the occasions that I've been privileged to. Let me tell a personal story. In 2014, when the Royals went to their first World Series, right after the game that allowed us to enter the series, I stood in my office and I literally cried. The rush of tears surprised me. In reflection, the depth of emotion happened because I felt Dayton's win validated the hard work of every leader who has ever led. many people were harsh in their assessment that the Royals could never win here in such a small market. When Dayton won, every leader won, and every leader was validated. So today's episode is going to be extra special for me. Today's episode was recorded at a quarterly event that we host called Empowering Leaders. It's a luncheon featuring interviews with great leaders, sharing with many other of the great marketplace leaders in our area. We're privileged to host this event in partnership with Bank of the Prairie and Country Club Bank. So on today's episode, I interviewed Dayton Moore. The live conversation originally took place on January 28, 2020. In this conversation, Dayton talked about the power behind craving feedback, the difference in having people see you with a critical eye versus a critical spirit, the importance of embracing change. Well, that's what we're living in now. He even went into how pornography impacts players' abilities to focus. He talked about how people want to lead in environments where teammates and superiors have your back. He affirmed that what you fail to confront, you condone, and a whole lot more. But first, I'm so glad to have you with us wherever you're getting your podcast, either in the video version on YouTube or at your Apple or other podcast outlet. We drop new content every week, and we shoot for Thursdays of the month. If this podcast is adding value to your leadership in life, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the podcast, like it, comment in the reviews. Also help us get the word out by sharing on your social media platforms. Red Ink Revival platform is for all leaders in every sphere of leadership. However, my 30 plus years of senior leadership experiences happened in the context of church and ministry. Many of my stories are laden with church world experiences. Yet the principles will cross-pollinate no matter what sphere you lead in. Today's episode is brought to you in partnership with River Valley Conference. River Valley Conference is an amazing pastor and church leader conference. I landed at one of their one-day events here in Kansas City, and it was just off the charts. At River Valley Conference, hosted in Minneapolis, Minnesota, you're going to find a bunch of like-minded pastors and ministry leaders. The event is hosted by some top-tier leaders in Pastors Rob and Becca Ketterling, along with their entire River Valley Church team. The conference takes place over 2 days to inspire and equip teams to build strong and thriving churches in their community. Dynamic speakers, there's powerful worship moments and practical breakouts that will inspire your team and bring insights and solutions to the problems that you're facing. And Red Ink Revival is going to be facilitating a breakout. Come meet our team of psychologists and therapists. We're all going to be there, and we want to see you and your teams hold nothing back as you step into all that God has for you. River Valley Conference is June 8th and 9th, 2020. Go to rivervalleyconference.com, and for all our Red Ink tribe, use the code REDINK, one word, REDINK, for $10 off. I hope I get to see you there. Let's go now to this week's episode number 13 with one of my favorite people, Dayton Moore of the Kansas City Royals. Dayton, you know, because I've already shared it with you in different occasions, but thank you for being here because you are one of my very favorite leaders. You have, by example, led, and I've watched you from a distance, and to watch your consistency, your integrity, your honesty with everyone that you deal with, from the executives in the office to sports radio and the news to even the players. I so love who you are, and what is on the inside of you comes out as you lead the organization. And there's no doubt in my mind that's why we have World Series rings around the Kansas City Royals. And so it's such an incredible honor to have you here today. Let me set up. Dayton is married to Marianne. They've been married for 26 years. They've got 3 kids. Ashley is 24, Avery's 21, and then Robert is 18. 17. I had him at 17, but I bumped him up to 18. And I believe he's playing ball somewhere. Is he in high school still?
No, he actually graduated early, and he's at the University of Arkansas. So we dropped him off January 6th, and so he's going through that stage of his life.
That is crazy. I'm a Razorback. Yeah. I grew up a Razorback. and now you're connected to the Razorbacks. Yes, yeah. Let's just take a moment of silence and pause and reflect. It's incredible. Well, let's talk a little bit about leadership. Okay. You are clearly a leader of leaders. And as you lead leaders and as you think leadership, what does it mean to you to be a leader? Let's go to ground zero.
I think, it's something obviously we're very passionate about. I try to study leadership all the time, daily, pay attention to current events and things that are happening and how we deal with certain things as a community and as a society. And what I've come to discover that, leadership is probably needed today more than any other period of time, maybe in the history of our country. And there's fewer and fewer people willing to step up and lead. And I had some interesting conversations with Mike Matheny, who is our new manager, who's going to be terrific. He's going to be powerful in our community. He's one of the truly wonderful and terrific and impactful leaders that I've been around. But I asked Mike Matheny this question. I said, Mike, why do you want to do this? I mean, you're not getting younger. You're not getting healthier. You're not getting more time to spend with your family and the people that you love. You're financially, you're pretty set for life. I mean, he played 13 years in the major leagues, and he's done well. I said, why do you want to do this? He said, well, I love leadership. I love coming alongside of young people and helping them navigate through life. He said, but the only reason I'm willing to do this is because you guys got my back. I feel like somebody's got my back. And I find that to be a real common theme today with why people don't want to step out and lead. They don't want to put maybe their reputation on the line, or they don't want to confront a certain aspect of their family or their community or their team. I mean, we're dealing with this in the industry right now in Houston, where we have a sign stealing scandal that's taking place in baseball. And I was just with the commissioner of baseball yesterday at a different function, actually Mr. Glass's funeral, and Commissioner Manford spoke so well and honored Mr. Glass yesterday. But I asked Commissioner Manford how he was dealing with it, and he says, "Well, look, we're going to confront it, we're going to expose it, and we're going to meet the challenges head on, and then we're going to be honest about it and transparent, and we're going to move on. We're going to fix it." And so my point is in all of this that people will not step up and lead unless they have people around them that they feel like that will encourage them, which is what motivates people anyway. It's encouraging words, written or spoken. That's what motivates people. And but they're not going to step up and lead unless you have their back. And so one of the things that I've always felt in leadership, Rusty Kuntz, who's somebody I've worked with for 20-some years now. He's going to be our first base coach again this next upcoming season. He talks about what you permit, you promote. And one of the things that we've always felt in leadership is that we say it a different way: what you fail to confront, you condone. And so that's what happened in Houston. Leadership at the highest level, knew things were taking place. They didn't want to confront it. So the fact that they didn't confront it, they were condoning it. Why didn't they want to confront it? Well, because they felt like, truthfully, nobody had their back. They didn't have the support of people above them that was going to allow them to lead effectively.
That's amazing. So when you talk about leadership, would you say that leadership is the same in essence and even beyond the core essence when you look at family, when you look at your neighborhood, when you look at any environment that you find yourself in?
I really do. I think that, one of the things, and for the sake of transparency, I'm a follower of Jesus, so a lot of leadership principles that we use and personally in my family, it's right out of the Gospels. And I think I read something Tim Keller said a few years ago, and it's always stuck with me. And he said, "You're never going to flourish or be healed. You're only going to flourish or be healed to the level that you're under the leadership of Jesus." Come on. So you're only going to prosper and you're only going to be healed to the level that you're under Jesus' leadership. And so that's always stuck with me. And so I know who I am. And I know that the only way that we're going to be able to lead effectively, manage stress, learn to respond instead of react is, if I'm grounded and I have that balance in my life. And prayer is a big part of how we manage situations in our life every single day. And so that's really important. But I think there's never been a person I've ever worked with or been a part of in 27 years of professional baseball, 5 years as a college coach before that, where their personal life hasn't leaked into their professional life, and their professional life doesn't leak into their personal life. And so I think it's all tied together.
Yeah. I think about that, and I think about people like Tiger Woods, or I think of Kareem Hunt that was with the Chiefs. And he's like Kareem, he's trying to get his traction again. Something happened in his personal life. Something went off rails. And as a result, it is impacting everything now that he actually has the internal gifts to really execute, but it struggles. I think when I look at business, when I think of leadership in organizations like the Royals, that these things actually bleed into that. At Red Ink Revival, we again say we believe driven leaders ought to know what they're driven by. We try to look at the neuroscience, the psychology, and as you're talking about, the theology behind why you do what you do. So you are in a unique chair. You get to see people who are gifted at the highest levels of athletics. You get to see a distinction between a Hall of Famer and someone who is maybe never able to break out of the minor leagues. How much of that comes back to what people call soft skills versus the hard skills? Can you talk about that a little bit with athletes?
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed that people that reach their ceiling, they're extremely committed and they're driven and they're open to all types of feedback. They want information. They can't get enough information. Now, they need people around them to help them apply it and to utilize it correctly. And I think that's really important, but they're smart. I mean, they have a growth mindset with everything that they do. Some guys are just so gifted they can get away with a lot of different things, and maybe they don't have to manage their personal life as well because they're so gifted, but eventually they get exposed. One of my mentors, Tim Cash, always talks about, in fact, he just gave a presentation to all of our minor league players that were in here last week, but he makes the following statement, and it's so true, and I've seen it played out over and over again. When your talent, when your giftedness takes you further than your character can sustain you, there will be a shipwreck. Right. And so that's just time and time again. And so that's why it's so important to have people in your life that are going to speak truth into your life. Somebody told me probably about 20 years ago, they said, Dayton, one of the good things about you is you listen to a lot of people and you get opinions from a lot of people. One of the negative things about you is that you listen to a lot of people and you get a lot of opinions, right? So what he was telling me was, I need some discernment. I need to recognize who has earned the right to speak into my life through that trust and experience. And people are looking at every single one of us each and every day in one of two ways. They're looking at us with a critical eye or a critical spirit. Thank God for those people that are looking at us with a critical eye. They shape us, they mold us, they help us uncover blind spots. We need those people in our lives. The only reason I get to set up here today and as a general manager coming up on my 14th year is because, people have chipped away at me and they've helped mold me and shape me. And then I've learned that, those people that are looking at us with a critical spirit, you're not going to please them. You do what's right. You try to go above and beyond to help them and to serve them and to be responsive to them, to show that you care about them. But if you're not going to be able to please them at the end of the day, I've learned to just give that away. And my faith allows me to do that. I find myself at times, getting burnt out or frustrated. Is there something else that I need to do? I mean, we've had some challenges the last couple of years. Not any challenges that we weren't anticipating or expecting. We actually knew in the off season of 2015 that we were going to experience some major rebuild efforts in 18, 19, 20, and 21, and we're here. But it's harder to live through it than it is just to say it, right? And so we've had to learn, as I said, to kind of manage through those things and give things away. But when I find myself getting burnt out and frustrated, I can always trace it back to the same thing. It goes back to there's something in my life I need to forgive. There's a relationship I need to mend. I'm fighting the world, and I can't win. There's not a person dead or alive that ever fought the world and won. You got to play the hand that you're given. Yeah. In baseball, we've always told players for years, you can't fight this game and be successful. There's not a player dead or alive that ever fought the game and won. Whatever hand you're dealt, you just got to play it. And if you play that hand well, you'll be satisfied. You'll reflect back knowing that you gave your best effort and you made the best at what you were given. And there's a lot of peace and harmony in that.
You were talking about when you notice that you're burning out, losing motivation, that you notice that you have unforgiveness, bitterness, other things like that working in your life. What I always listen to when I hear things like that is the fact you're tuned in to emotional happenings. Because emotional happenings, emotion just means in motion, and you are aware that it's expressing through behaviors, through interactions with staff, players, right down the line. What's wild to me is that somewhere in your life, you learn that it's incredibly important to tune in to what's happening in your emotions, because they are gauges, like in the dash of your car, telling you something about you, that if you don't dig into it, it's not going away. Switch gears back to the first part of what you were answering there. You were talking about players that are high performance, high impact players. They are dedicated to their craft. They love accountability. Well, I can kind of frame that up for an athlete. Makes sense, because they're competing against athletes around the world, and you can't rest. You can't breathe, because you got to have an edge. Now then, you see that, but you also, at one of the great organizations of the world, the Kansas City Royals, you get to see it played out in the office. So if athletes are hungry for accountability and growth, how do you see that play out in kind of the business sector, the marketplace?
No, absolutely. I mean, in fact, we had a staff meeting today with Mr. John Sherman, who is our new owner, and we talked a lot about what can we do to continue to pour into our employees, help them in all aspects of their life, provide them with the resources that are helping them to be, great husbands and great wives and mothers and fathers, and what can we do, because we understand and we realize that if their team at home is thriving or managing things in a way that has balance and future productivity, they're going to be much better for us, in the workplace, and they'll feel a special connection, I believe, to the Royals. And so those are some of the things that we've talked about, where we have a book of the month club or the quarter, and we're all studying a certain topic together, and hopefully it's relevant to maybe what we're dealing with. So with preparing to win in the future, and so you learn so much through the hard times and these challenges that we're experiencing right now versus the good times. And that's the exciting thing about leadership. We've had managerial change and ownership change in the exact same year, and I can't think of an organization that has experienced that in the last 25, 30 years, since I've been doing this. And but I find it all just very fascinating. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the leadership challenges of new ownership and the minority owners that are all involved. I think it's an opportunity to learn so much, and so that at some point in time in my life, I will be able to reflect back on this experience and share it with other people, share it with my family members, maybe share it if I'm blessed to have grandkids someday. And so that's what it's all about. I mean, whoever embraces change and the challenges the best are the ones that are going to be most successful. And, I think of Alex Gordon, our star left fielder, when we asked him to change positions and we sent him to Omaha when he was just a young player. And I looked how he handled that. I mean, he didn't complain. He didn't lash out. He didn't make excuses. He didn't blame hitting coach. He didn't blame manager. He didn't blame general manager. He didn't blame teammates. He just said, you know what, I'll do what you need me to do. And he embraced that situation, that circumstance, that event, as if it was the best thing to ever happen to him. Wow. And that's why he was able to persevere and become, a two-time American League champion, World Series champion, three-time All-Star, 7-time Gold Glove winner. And that was not in the future for Alex Gordon at the time. He was not projecting that path, but he handled it and managed it well. So I think it's so important as leaders that we've got to kind of rush to the front. And I tell our people all the time that whenever you wake up in the day and you go through a period of time where you don't want people's problems, then you probably need to step aside in leadership for a while, because you've got to want to be the person that is there to help solve problems, and you want your people to be able to come to you with their issues. We tell our people, our players all the time, your problems are my problems. Yeah. And, you've got to hold them accountable. You've got to see some growth. You've got to lay out a plan and see them progress with them. But you want them to come with you with their issues and their problems, and that, therefore, you can come together and try to find solutions.
That's amazing. I mean, that's just amazing. First of all, congratulations on re-signing Gordo. That is awesome. I watched the press conference, and I thought, oh my gosh, again, how much these guys love you. And sitting here hearing how you care about them, that it's a safe place for them to come deal with even problematic issues in their life, because if they will come honestly, you'll be there to walk them through that. When I think of leading, I think of John Maxwell saying, the great leadership guru, he said that if you're leading and nobody's following, you ain't leading, you're just taking a walk. When it comes to teams, your success is all about team. I mean, not just athletics, but in an office, in a vision, in a corporation. It's who you have on your team makes all the difference in the world. Help us think for a minute how you as a leader look for players. So you're constantly surveying. I mean, players I've never even heard of, that somewhere you pick them and you bring them in. Sometimes their numbers may not look amazing, and yet by the time you're done with them, they fit into the culture. They created an impact for the outcomes of the vision of the Kansas City Royals. What do you look for whenever you're trying to get a player to be a part of the family?
Well, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, we do all the background checks that everybody does. I mean, it's very easy to evaluate talent. It's not that challenging, truthfully. The hardest thing for us to predict is how players are going to manage the setbacks, the failures in their lives, and are they going to manage it in a productive way? And oftentimes, we dig into that. We want to know who their mentors are. We hope like heck they say their dad. It's not always the case, unfortunately.
Why is that?
I think that what I've learned in baseball anyway, that players young men receive a lot of their moral guidance from their father. A lot of the discipline, the players that are most disciplined had a good relationship with their father. The players that manage kind of the critical eye aspect of it, the constructive criticism that takes place from another male. If they didn't have a strong relationship with their father or another male figure, they're a little more rebellious. Not always the case, but that's just, we want that. We want them to have strong male role models in their life. And, I was at Lansing Correctional Facility about 10 days ago, and I was speaking to, some of the inmates there, and it's one of the most powerful things that I get to do. It really is. And, when you start diving deeper with those men that are incarcerated, you find out two things. They didn't have a strong male role model in their life, and they're in there because of pride. And they'll tell you, I didn't walk away.
Yeah.
I had too much pride.
Yeah.
And, it's so much wisdom in that room.
Wow.
I mean, it is so much wisdom when you sit down, especially some of those inmates that have been there for years, and some of them aren't getting out, but they've got some great wisdom. And we know where wisdom comes from. Wisdom comes from God. It comes from deep, honest reflection of your life. It's not an acquisition of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's wisdom and that's the number one thing you want as a leader. You want wisdom. You can't get enough wisdom. And I find myself constantly asking God, help us make this decision. Bring us the players you want us to have. And sometimes they're not the star players. Sometimes we get players that are absolutely messed up. They'll never play in the major leagues, but they need some help with mental health, spiritual guidance, and we're fortunate to have a group in place that can be a caretaker and help in a lot of those areas. And the teams that are going to be most successful in the future in developing players, they're going to do two things really well, or they won't be successful. They're going to be able to help their players with behavior science, the mental part of it, dealing with anxiety, sleeping disorders, depression that a lot of these young players and young people are experiencing today that we didn't necessarily have to grow up with. And then they're going to be able to help their players grow spiritually. They're going to be able to get the mind and the heart and line it up. And if you can do that, you're going to have a pretty balanced player that's going to let their genetics, their DNA, their gifts to play baseball, to go out and freed up, to go out and play and do what they love to do. But if they can't make good choices and their fuel, their heart, and their mind aren't lined up, it's just going to be a rough road for them.
I want to invite you to one of our Red Ink Revival Leadership Retreats. Retreats are 40-hour plus intensive experiences led by psychotherapists, neuroscientists, and tenured pastors. These amazing intensives help pastors, staff, and marketplace leaders lead wholeheartedly in every sphere of life. Our retreats are profoundly helpful to you as you lead your organization. However, the most important person you will ever lead is you. Pastors and marketplace leaders struggle with the same emotional drivers. Statistics show that 70% of pastors struggle with depression and fear of inadequacy. 77% feel they do not have a good marriage. 90% are workaholics. 64% are engaged in secret activity around alcohol, drugs, and sexual behaviors. 84% wish they had a processed friendship that they could confide in, but grieve the fact that they don't have such a person. Today's leaders are painfully struggling with depression, isolation, anxiety, and panic attacks, and then powerlessly ruminating over what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. Then to right the ship, leaders tend to chase the illusion that a greater performance and a greater success will quiet the enemy in their souls. But performance, even if gained, measured, and celebrated, never quiets the soul. These ruminating emotional states gain momentum over days, months, and years and give power to unmanageable behaviors like rage in marriage, avoidance as parents, or addictions like alcoholism, recreational drugs, pornography, or sexually acting out. For the spiritual leader, succumbing to one or more of these throws them into a firestorm of shame that ultimately keeps them in a cycle of bondage. Yet neurobiologically, we have learned that inordinate behavior is never about the ability to white-knuckle discipline through the temptation. The behavior is driven by emotional griefs, losses, and relationship injuries from our backstories. These emotional memories become embedded into our brain's neurocircuits. Until these memories are addressed and appropriately reprocessed, the struggler will continue to grow in the struggle until there comes the day of public discovery and painful disclosure. Red Ink Retreats provide hands-on experiences in concepts, techniques, and coaching derived from theology, brain research, and psychological modalities. Our goal is to improve your individual leadership satisfaction, releasing a freedom for an energized life and a surprising greater performance. Go to redinkrevival.com and click the Retreats tab. You'll be inspired by previous retreat attenders, you'll hear their stories, and then you can dream of what could happen if you attended a retreat yourself. It might bring exponentially more fruitfulness to your organization. It might save your ministry, your marriage, your kids, and maybe even your self-respect. What is the value of leading wholeheartedly? So what are you waiting for? Go and register for our next retreat. Thank you for letting me share our Red Ink Retreats dream.
I think it's amazing in the world of addiction, we like to enlighten the person struggling in compulsive behavior, that it's really not the behavior that is the issue. It is the upstream problems of emotional dysregulation, and in that anxiety, in chasing identity, which, gosh, I can't even imagine what these athletes are dealing with, because so many of them do have an identity connected to whether they make it or not.
They do.
I was talking with somebody who had been on the Royals farm team for a while, and he just couldn't get up. He just couldn't get to the big leagues, and today he doesn't want to even think about baseball. Mm-hmm. Because it has a pain point to him connected to identity.
You know what, a lot of it, you're 100% right. And first of all, we tell all of our players, every player I've ever sat in their home or talked to, look, it's a minor miracle to play in the major leagues. And I'm going to tell you right now, you grew up in the United States of America. That means you're disadvantaged mentally. Because you have had it differently than those kids in Cuba, the Dominican, and Venezuela. And in our game, you don't go right to the NBA or the NFL. If you're really good, it's 3.5 years in the minor leagues. And you're experiencing everything that every other player's experienced, and it's every single day. There's no mental or physical break in the game of baseball. You can't just put it all aside for one day a week.
Wow.
You've got to be ready. You've got to show up every single day, and you've got to be able to give your best. And that's how you explain a 50th rounder in Gerard Dyson, who nobody ever thought would make it to the major leagues. And that happens quite frequently in the game of baseball. But first of all, it's a minor miracle to get there. And so what we try to always tell our players is, look, the lessons learned in one baseball game, one season, an entire career, those leadership lessons that you learn playing will take you further than anything that you can imagine, and will prepare you for a lot of aspects of life. So use the game as an opportunity to sharpen your leadership skills and to prepare you to be a great husband and a great father one day. And that's what it's all about, because the guys that have it in perspective are the ones that are going to reach their ceiling. Again, they're genetically gifted. And so, a few years ago, we got criticized because we felt that we needed to educate a lot of our players. And really our deeper concern was their kids and their grandkids someday with what's happening in the world of pornography now. When these kids are getting exposed to pornography at, 8, 9, 10 years old. And, I don't know about you, but I know when I first saw it, I was 20, 21, and it gave me a distorted view of what an appropriate relationship ought to be like. And so we're transparent about that with our players, right? Yeah. But we brought that up because in our game, focus, concentration, mental toughness is so important. You've got to be able to focus. You've got to concentrate. And when there's only 13 to 18 minutes of actual activity, when you exclude the pitcher and the catcher in a 9-inning baseball game, there's a lot of those guys are thinking about out there.
Yeah.
And what I've learned in 27 years of being in professional baseball and 5 years as a college coach, every major issue that we have had with a player as it pertains to a relationship with a female that is inappropriate and wrong and abusive,
yes,
when you sit down and you talk to them about it, they trace it back to pornography. And kids are very upfront about those things. And they will tell you because they want to be helped. They know that the only way to fix, as an athlete, the only way to fix things is to confront them and try to get better. And so if you develop the type of relationship where players can come to you, I mean, they'll share those things with you. And we're fortunate that we have people around them that are willing to help with them, because just like I told our players that were in here last week for the 2019 draft class, guys, we have never released a player for testing positive for drugs or alcohol or some other drug. We've never released a player because of their addiction. We've never released a player because of some relationship that didn't go right. We're here to help. Yeah. Now, we're not going to cover anything up. Yeah. We will never cover anything up. We will always tell the truth.
Yes.
But we're here to help. That's what leadership's about. Leadership begins and ends with putting others first. You should not have the privilege to lead if you're not trying to help other people reach their ceiling. I mean, that's what leadership's about.
That is so amazing. As you know, my certification in a secular organization that trains in addiction behavior, it's called the International Institute of Trauma and Addiction Professionals. I'm actually certified as a sexual addiction professional. It's a secular organization. And what's interesting is that anytime there's addiction related to anything sexual, you're talking porn, it is always considered an intimacy disorder. So now then we're bringing it back. And I'm not saying any of this to criticize anybody, to shame anybody, but here's what's true that often we don't realize is if we have an intimacy disorder, it just simply means we haven't the ability to connect with those people around us. It's going to radically impact the quality of your leadership in any arena that you want to lead in, because you're not really aligned with yourself. And so while this is a leadership marketplace event, and you and I were not planning on hitting any of that, and of course, people might...
I'm dangerous that way. Everybody
you
tells
are.
me,
Where are we going? But to profile those things, it actually is relevant very much, as is anxiety, as is depression. Those things are only faces, characteristics of deeper happenings spinning below the surface. So that brings me to the idea of, when I think about Gordo, I mean, I love that he has been on our team. I love all the accomplishments he's made. I'm proud, particularly that he is a lifetime Royal. That is awesome. And yet, after the World Series, you had to make a signing. You had to make a decision around his contract. And of course, it was a big one. And that contract, the next season he comes out, he struggles at the plate, and he struggled on a few different occasions. First of all, you're like a mentor, and I'm even going to say a dad figure to him, it seems. And his affection for you, even in the press conference recently, is just stunning for me. I mean, I felt the same love to you as I felt him given to you, and I've never been in a locker room with you, but this is what you typically lead with. So whether it's Gordo or any other player, it's got to be crazy to be a player, to know that sports radio is eating you alive, you're not worth the money and all that kind of stuff, and trying to get a player out of the victim mindset and to regain confidence. How do you approach that? Because it's an emotional thing. How do you approach the emotional resetting to help somebody like a Gordo or any player to overcome what seems like I just can't seem to get the wood on the ball? What would
Well, I think with professional athletes, oftentimes if they're not performing well, and assuming they're healthy and they're not performing well, it's usually some type of distraction in their life. Okay, so Gordo probably wouldn't mind me sharing this with this group. When we signed the big contract, and he didn't get off to a real good start, and he was struggling. But the one thing that didn't come out, he was nursing kind of a wrist injury. He's not going to ever make an excuse about that. But the deeper thing in his life was his father. His hero in life was he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he was he was fading fast. And so, again, when you got to show up every single day, focus, just concentration, mental toughness, perseverance, you've got to study. And if you're off by this much in the major leagues, you're going to lose. And so, of course, he's a husband and a father at the same time, and just managing things, off the field. So a lot of times it's things that they're dealing with in their personal life, and he's not going to make excuses for that, and he's certainly not going to bring any of that attention on himself during that period of time, because it's just looked on as an excuse anyway. But I'll protect him in that way. But it's it's very difficult to achieve day in and day out. And the thing about Gordo is, and his commitment level's so high. I mean, he just shows up every single day. He's very consistent, with his work, and he's just an example of what you want to see in a young player. And certainly, he's done it, so well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I've got two more questions for you. So when Ned Yost retired, the emotions that you experienced in your press conference, what I saw, I'm like, in fact, I sent you an email and said, I'm going to apply for the job, not because I understand baseball like that at all, but I just want to be a part of your team. I want to be a part of your family. The love that you have with him, he is a friend of many years. He's a faith brother to you, but he's also an employee. You're a boss to him. There's something in the world of therapy called dual relationships. And if you have more than one relationship with somebody that you're serving, you're leading, it begins to complicate it until it can create real problems. How do you manage the idea that you're his boss, but you are very close to him as a friend and a faith brother? How did you handle it?
I think that's a little easier for me to lead when I have a strong relationship with somebody, because I've always felt that, there's often times where you have to stand up in front of a group, you have to kind of create the vision, articulate the message, and get everybody on board, if you will. It's hard to build a consensus. But you've got to try. The only way to truly do it is develop those relationships, those one-on-one conversations, relationships that you develop in small groups. And I've always felt if people really know your heart and you have done everything you can to understand them. And Dr. King said, if you want to be understood, you must understand somebody else. That's always been important to me. Dr. King also said that power without love is reckless and abusive. And so as a leader, you have to have the ability to love the people that you work with. Yeah. And I don't know how to do that other than my faith allows me and demands to do that. Scripture tells me to love my neighbor as myself. Yeah. And so as we've entered this leadership journey, I've always felt that's so important. That's where the Gospels have always been crucial to my leadership. And so if you confront in love, not in emotion, I mean, there's never, ever an excuse for ever sitting down and discussing something with someone and say, I just got to get this off my chest. And when someone begins a conversation with me like that, I always say, is this for you, or is this for the health of the organization, or is this for me? Because if this is just for you to get your emotions out, if it's not for the good of the group or the good of the organization, then we probably need to do some counsel somewhere else. I'm not into that. Yeah. I'm not into you just so you feel better and get it off your chest. The only thing that you should do, what's the most redeeming for the other person? That's what we ought to be doing. I want to be confronted in a way that is loving and challenging and exposing my blind spots. Not because you're upset, because I for some reason I didn't say good morning to you because my mind was somewhere else and you were hurt. That's not my heart. And so what I want to be able to do with Ned and Mike Matheny and Mr. Sherman and everybody we work with at all levels is just to develop the closest relationship possible. And, we've had to release a lot of players. We've had to let go of a lot of people through performance. And so, it usually goes something like this. And I don't sleep a lot of times the night before. I don't enjoy those conversations, but it usually goes something like this, very direct, very straight. Look, I'm proud of you. I love what we were able to accomplish together. You've done some amazing things, but unfortunately, we're going to go in a different direction. And I really believe that this is the best thing for the organization. Hopefully, in time, you will see that as well. This is just our opinion. This is just what we believe right now. You don't have to believe it, but you have to respect it, and we're here to help you move forward onto the next phase of your life, whether it be a player, a coach, a scout, a front office employee. But I think if you're always transparent and honest and you're able to develop that relationship in a strong way, you can have those honest and upfront conversations. This time last year, I wasn't sure Ned was going to step away. But we had a lot of conversations along the way like we're having right now. And we just felt it was probably best for everybody involved for Ned to, decide that he was going to retire at this point in time. It wasn't an easy decision. But together we hashed that out and we talked about that for months before he ultimately came to that conclusion.
Your emotional intelligence is incredible for how you lead. Even when you're talking about somebody wanting to get something off their chest, you didn't tune into what they said. And your curiosity didn't eat you up to be, I wonder what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. I wonder what they want. I wonder what their burr under their saddle is. And I know as a leader myself, I've got a pretty high curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I love how tuned in to the emotional side of all of that you are, how you've demonstrated that, and the honesty that you have there. That I've in reading and then talking to certain people in the industry, it's not common that a GM has those conversations with players. Sometimes players find out they get traded, and apparently they never even talk to the GM. And for you to care that much, it requires a great deal, or the reaction is everybody trusts you, because that's where trust is built.
One of the things a pastor told me probably 30 years ago, I heard a pastor make the following statement, and there's not a week goes by where I'm not reminded of this, okay? And it's simply, the statement is this: if you treat everybody that you encounter and meet with on a daily basis like they're having a bad day, you're probably treating them appropriately. You don't have to know anything about them.
I like
the
that.
People you meet in the grocery store, the people that you interact with on the elevator, the people that you're side by side at the stoplight. I mean, they're probably having a bad day. I know when I put my head on the pillow at night, when I reflect back, the day didn't go perfect. I mean, there were challenges along the way. And so I'm reminded how much we need encouraging people in our life. Mm. People are either bringing us up or they're bringing us down. And you need to have those positive people, optimistic people that are speaking encouragement into your life. Encouraging words, written or spoken, is what motivates people. I've learned that through time, and then that's a question that I get asked constantly. How do you motivate players? How do you motivate people? You're in the sports world. How do you motivate? How do you motivate? Well, I've never really found a great answer, but the best answer I've ever found is just encourage people, speak positivity into their life, and they feel good about themselves.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, I know I'm a better leader for having been with you today. Thank you for all of your wisdom. Here's my last question.
Well, let me say that if there's anything good in me, it comes from God, okay? You've got so much more wisdom, and people in this room have so much more wisdom than I do. I just want to be a good steward of what I've learned from other people. I want to be a good steward of the life God granted me, and it's as simple as that.
Well, you're carrying that image well. You're carrying the heart well, and I just appreciate that. So here's my final. in 2020. What are you excited about with these Royals this year?
Every team is special. And I'm always very enthused to get to spring training and to see what's going to happen in the 2020 season. I mean, it's a script that hasn't been written, and the players, all have stories. They're all different phases of their life. Whit Merrifield just got married in the off season. Hunter Dozier, they had another child, and so these guys are constantly evolving as husbands and fathers, and so they're continuing to grow and get better. So that's going to bring a dynamic and an element into the clubhouse that wasn't there last year. And so I just love being around their stories and watching them lead through life. And of course at 7:00 I get a great seat. I get to watch the game from a great view. But I will tell you this, that I still love baseball as much as ever, but what I find that I love more than baseball is just the leadership aspect of it. Matthew West, singer-songwriter, says it this way. He says, life is more fulfilling when you become a character in somebody else's story. Wow. And so I've kind of tried to make that a part of how I want to lead. And that's been, he's right. It is more fulfilling. So that's what I look forward to. I mean, we've got a good group of young pitchers on the horizon. Our position players are really talented, and Jorge Soler and Alberto Mondesi, Dozier, Nicky Lopez, Whit Merrifield. I mean, we've got these guys that are emerging. Salvador, obviously, Perez is back, and his enthusiasm and charisma out there is really, really special. I mean, he makes baseball look like so much fun. Shows absolutely. Personality on the field, and so there's a lot I'm looking forward to. But the leadership aspect of it is really what I enjoy more than anything else.
Last time before we made it to the World Series, you said we are 1 or 2 years out. You were it happened a year early from what you prophesied, projected. So what's your projections? When are we going to get back and get us a ring?
It's I just feel like we're just going to keep getting better and better. And, that I really believe that. We'll just keep getting better and better. We're preparing to win right now. A lot of it depends. I'll have a better feel for that this time next year as we look at some of our young pitchers and see how they're developing and where they are in their timeline, and we'll have a better feel for that. I will say this, with the economics of baseball today, it's getting more and more challenging. It really is. I think we're trying to do some things in the next basic agreement that hopefully bring a little more parity. I mean, we celebrate the fact that in the modern era of baseball since 1994, we're the only small market team to ever win a World Series, let alone go to a back-to-back World Series, which some people say is even more challenging. So we celebrate that, and we're encouraged by that, but we're by no means satisfied. I mean, we want to continue to do it. We want to try to do it better. We want sustained success where we can, reflect back and have a long period of winning. Harder to do in the economics of baseball today, but a challenge that we believe that is worthy and one that we're going to embrace.
I love it. I misspoke. One more question. How about those Chiefs? What are you thinking?
It's been fun to really watch them compete. I mean, to me, they're a much better team this year. You may not have an individual player that is having just an unbelievable year and somewhat of a historic year like Patrick Mahomes had last year, but they just play together as a team. They're very consistent. There was no doubt in my mind they were going to come back from being down 24-0. I just felt that they would come back, and I don't know why, but it's been exciting. And the success of the Chiefs, the success of the Royals and Sporting KC and others, I mean, it really puts us in a national spotlight that's really important for our city, because I look at Kansas City and I really believe that the behavior that exists in Kansas City, what we are modeling, how we go about our lives on a daily basis is going to be the model that the country is going to point to into the future. And I believe that about our community. I've seen it. I mean, we win here because everybody can put others' needs, wants, and desires first, and their own needs, wants, desires second. It truly is a selfless place, Kansas City is.
It's an amazing place, yeah. That was awesome. Can you guys give it up for Dayton Moore? Wasn't it wonderful? We love you, man.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you for joining us today. I want to encourage you that you are enough to lead through this unprecedented time. God has called and anointed you to bring innovative solutions to the novel problems that we're facing. We at Red Ink Revival are praying for you to rise in this time. You might be wondering what's next. I want to encourage you to go to our website at redinkrevival.com. There you're going to find our resources, retreats, upcoming special events, and a growing bank of content. Sign up for our free e-newsletter to stay abreast of all that is available. Of special note, we are still planning to host our next Red Ink Revival Leadership Retreats for pastors and spouses, church staff and spouses, and all other leaders. I hope everyone can make it to one of these life-changing events. The dates and more info is at redinkrevival.com. Everything we're building is to resource you to be a wholehearted leader. I'd love for you to be a part of our community. I can't wait till our next episode, and I'm glad that you're with us today. See you next time.